Just say.
Okay, Joe Rogan on the latest podcast with Luke Thomas believes John Jones is a GOAT and says Jones' early career and fights up until Gustafsson surpassed Khabib. He also,
Is that really what he said?
yeah, that's what he said. So,
Okay.
so let's continue on with what he said. He also said that look at the way he beat DC in the first fight. He's basically saying that he took him down, and we all know that DC is a world class wrestler, right? So it's quite an achievement. So personally, I mean, we talked about this last week too. I still think that Khabib is. I still think he's a GOAT. It always comes back to the issue of steroids with John Jones. But as you said last week as well, no one's really going to know until a few years in the future. Maybe once they go back to the old samples and they actually check if he was on steroids or he wasn't on steroids. But I think it's a consensus that like even if he took it, it was trace amounts. But even then, I'm gonna stick with Khabib, especially after that last fight with Gaethje. As we said last week as well, it just makes sense that at this point he is the GOAT. So, I mean, that's me.
But okay, so would you assume that every fight before John Jones got popped, he was clean or no?
I mean, that's a pretty big assumption. I don't know about that, but
No, what do you think? Would you say he was clean before, or do you also say no? Since he got popped that time, you could assume that he was taking it all the way up until that point.
I mean, I want to think that when he first came into the UFC, probably not so, but I think maybe a few years in the future after he kept fighting the UFC, I think he probably started taking it.
Before or after the championship?
After.
After the championship. So you said that Joe Rogan was talking about how up until Gustafsson, right?
Yeah, so I think after the fight with Shogun,
I
think after the fight with Shogun is when he started popping it. But even then,
after the fight with he won the championship. When he beat.
Yeah, I know.
Shogun.
Yeah, so the fight after that is when he started taking it. Honestly, like it just because you see what he did to. So actually, I watched a fight against Rashad Evans and Rampage Jackson, and the fight with Machida. And like if you actually watch these fights, he didn't lose any of these rounds. And the way he just ran, and the way he just ran through these guys, it just didn't look too clean to me. I don't know. And after with that whole scandal with the steroids and like hiding underneath the ring and everything, I don't know. Like to me, it's too shady, it's too fishy. But I don't know. It's
you can't take away what he did in those in the octagon, like you said, right? So he still beat all those guys, and those guys are all champions in their own rights. Machida, Rashad Evans, and Rampage were all champions at one point, and he did beat them. But the thing is that what did he necessarily beat them with? He didn't necessarily beat them with the best cardio. He didn't necessarily beat them with the most power. He just used his abilities and techniques, his athleticism and his point fighting, where he just wears you down with his reach to beat the opponent. So yes, steroids would help you, or some performance enhancing drug will help you have an edge, right? Physically, it won't hinder you. Will help you, of course.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, do you think he actually really needed them? I don't think he needed them to beat any of those guys.
I'll tell you this though. Speaking on his athleticism, I remember, I'm not sure if it was past the Shogun fight, but I remember there's an article saying that his lifts basically they skyrocketed, right? As in like his bench, his squat, his deadlift. And like no matter how you put it though, he was on peds, right? So if he's fighting these guys on peds, even though you could always say, okay, it was up to skill, right? But he's still on the drugs, like this.
No, but you're flip-flopping though, right? Because like you're either in the camp that he was taking them for the purpose of performance enhancing, or were they just tainted supplements and very small traces. So if you're trying to say that he was like on it hardcore and he was it was a like main reason why he's got bigger and stronger, then that's a different scenario. I know of what you're referring to, where he started deadlifting a lot more and whatnot. He previously wouldn't do powerlifting at all, any of the Olympic lifts, from what he said. He only later on in his career fell in love with powerlifting and Olympic lifts, and that's where you saw him get massive, right? You see, I don't know if you've seen that picture where he's just huge. So now there is a presence of PEDs in that bodybuilding community, but to be fair to him, he hasn't been caught for a huge amount of PEDs, other than the first scenario where he claimed later on that it was tainted supplements.
Right. Okay. Well, let's segue into the second topic. The second topic.
So you're done. You just.
We're doing fast.
You agree with? You don't agree with Joe Rogan?
No.
You want to farm likes?
No. So I'll tell you again though. Farming likes. This guy.
You're farming likes for those Khabib fans, you know.
Of course. No. Listen. I'm gonna always say that Khabib is better than John Jones.
Just like the video, man.
Listen. No matter what comes out, I'm always gonna say Khabib, only because of of his dominance in the past few years. He's never lost a round, even though they're saying that he's lost a round. That he lost a round to Conor. Okay, fine. You know what? I agree with it.
And technically, he
lost a round with Gaethje. Yeah, with Gaethje. Well. But if you break it down, though, it made no sense because before the takedown, it was all Gaethje. And then past the takedown, it was Khabib.
I get it. It doesn't make sense, but you're talking from a technical standpoint. Oh, he never lost a round. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying he did lose 2 rounds. All right, it's not that big of a deal. Like, of course,
but very controversial rounds.
Lose rounds.
Yeah, but like very controversial rounds. So, you can make an argument that like he still has never lost a round. But yes, yes, he has lost a round. Okay.
My biggest thing is just longevity, right? Like, it's just not long enough. Like a lot of these guys that are in the GOAT status, like a John Jones, Anderson Silva, and GSP, they've done it over a very long time.
But also, if we're talking about skill
waves
level
of people,
if we're talking about skill level though, there's a big skill gap between a lightweight and light heavyweight, right? So,
what do you mean?
There's also like argument to be made, because with Khabib, he's like in the lightweight division, and the skill is much greater than it is like in the light heavyweight, right? So I don't know.
Not necessarily, and maybe right now, yeah, but not necessarily back in John Jones' early time or in GSP's light welterweight time.
Okay.
Right. I'm just saying it's hard to argue against guys that have done it over.
So give me your pick.
Done it over so many years and different waves of generations, right. Of fighters, right? Yeah. GSP fought so many different generations, and he beat them all, right? Anderson Silva fought many generations and beat them all, right? John Jones, the same thing. John Jones he was champion at 24 years old, right? He's like 33, 32 right now?
He's 33.
That's a lot of fights. He has more championship fights than regular fights.
Yeah, okay, so you agree with Rogan?
It's difficult. I think it's too soon. I think Khabib still has a chance to come back, and we'll see when what he does when he comes back.
What would Khabib have to do in order to just grab onto that GOAT status?
Beating George,
okay,
does help a lot. To think George St. Pierre is in his still prime form, it might be a little overstated, not true, but still beating George at whatever age, 39, is still a big achievement. So I think Khabib, if he beats George St. Pierre, he's up there in the conversation with John Jones, George, and Anderson. I still don't necessarily think he would be number one, but it's all hypothetical. So I'm not sure. I would have to see when he wins and how he beats George St. Pierre.
Well, I guess we won't know if he comes or until he comes back, right? So, okay.
If he comes back.
If he comes back.